Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. I'm delighted to be joined by Déwun today. He made an incredible documentary. It's very exciting because the documentary is set in South Africa and he's currently in Brazil right now. Can't wait to talk about this film. But for those that haven't seen Lockdown Lunch Club, let's take a look at the clip.
There's talk of the army, the police being on the streets to keep everybody in the homes. The guys we work with, especially, they have to be on the streets to hustle, to get money, to eat.
Abantu baphelele imisebenzi just because of the corona thing. And abanye abantu abanamali, poverty is coming up. Uthoni wasn't alone again lockdown. Then they're interested.
Déwun, this is a joy, and I'm glad we got to do this virtually. All the way from Brazil right now. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
I love your documentary so much. I've got so many.
Thank you.
But for those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis of your film.
Yeah. So thank you for the compliments on the film. And the film is called Lockdown Lunch Club. And on March 26th of last year, when, the pandemic was kind of at its height, the country of South Africa went into the strictest lockdown on the globe. And you had, military and police in the streets. It was very strict curfew. And in Langa, the country's first Black planned township, it's a place where it's known for, a lot of the negative things in life. And these group of young men stepped up during that time and ended up being the unlikely, heroes for their community.
I mean, I just love that you took us to a part of the world, right? And this time within this country, within this city, within this tiny town, like just brought to these great young human beings, our future generation, doing good for the community. I mean, we all know people have had different experiences with the pandemic, but just to see the next generation come through and shine a light on them, I'm so glad that you did this. And it was, where did the inspiration come for you personally to focus on these young men and turn it into a film?
Yeah. So, a little background is I was working on another project at the end of 2019, going into the top of 2020, and South Africa was, Cape Town in specific, was one of the cities that were on the docket for this project. And, that got shut down. COVID happened and the borders closed, and I ended up being essentially stuck there. All the airports were closed, the borders are shut down. And through this time being stuck there, as a doc filmmaker, you kind of say, you can say like, I'm stuck inside, I can't do anything, or you can take advantage of your circumstances and kind of find different things. So when it eased up just a little bit, I was able to hit the streets. I got introduced to this man named Tony Elvin, who runs a social enterprise nonprofit in Langa. And I took a tour of the place, met the guys, walked around the neighborhood, kind of just saw everything that was going on. And it touched me because, I am Ghanaian American, and I grew up split between those two worlds of having like the African side and African American side, and knowing that there is this story that in the US, we don't get to see very much positive press coming from the continent, of Africa. And here this opportunity was to like show that side, that these young guys who even their community had written off, they don't really think about them past, trouble, right? And here these guys are with hopes and dreams and ambitions and charismatic personalities, and stepping up during a time where, to be honest, they didn't have to. It was dealing with the pandemic. There's the mental stress and all the problems that come with, like being trapped and feeling suffocated and all these other things. And they found a way to not only mentally get past that, but then do good in the process. And I was just one of those stories that I felt like I had to capture, and I was there to capture that.
I mean, you had to capture it. I mean, how, you know what I mean? It was like it was a must thing. And, I think we there's definitely been a bit of a lost faith in humanity and how we treat each other. And, seeing your subjects just shine and knowing that this is the future generation just gave, like, for anyone that's experienced watching this film, a little bit more faith in humanity and kindness, and glad that this is the young men that are leading forwards, and forever it may be in their hearts and help them on their journey. Remember, that what they did during the pandemic. How do you go about, like, what's fascinating to me when you're directing someone, particularly when you're coming in to sort of almost make an accidental documentary, almost, really,
Mhm.
how do you go about telling these, like, young men, say, hey, we want to capture in a film doing this? Like, how does that process work, and how do you work with your subjects?
Yeah, so no, that is a good question. It's in documentary, it's one of those things to where you have to be observatory without like actually saying, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it was one of those things to where before I actually shot the film, I would go hang around them in the property in the neighborhood. It was about a month or two of me just hanging around to kind of get to know them, figure out what's actually happening and going on, just so by the time I was ready to shoot, I was comfortable with them. They were comfortable with me. They knew kind of what we were doing, why we were doing it. And so that helped a lot. I was able to do that. And so by the time we were actually filming, it wasn't they were nervous because obviously there's the cameras and the lights and et cetera, but it was less of that. Had I have been just, oh, I'm on a project, I'm popping up, nice to meet you, here's the camera in your face. It wasn't, I had a little bit of time. I had.
Well, you cared about. I mean, you cared about the story. You cared about them, and that's such an important part of is the trust of the director with the people that you're elevating. It's such an important element to it. But listen, you can have you have to work with what you've got, but you just so happen to come across these incredible personalities. Like, was it a great uncovering? Because I mean, they need a TV series, let alone documentary short, right?
Yeah. I could definitely see something being expanded with those three. Even since the documentary came out, and they've actually brought in more young men to the organization. So now instead of those three or four, there's, seven, eight, nine. And yeah, like luckily, those three were just ready to go. They were personalities, right? Gigi is something about him that pulls you in. Owetu, he's the one that wanted to start the restaurant. You know, Lanam wants to be like a interviewer and an on-air personality. So they were just kind of all ready to go.
It was really, what was so nice, like, it was so nice to hear their dreams. And I thought, like, and I resonated so much. I was like, damn, I want to go to your restaurant. Where is it gonna and I'm like, which mountain is this? I want to go up there and visit this, and it was just so great because, obviously we really hope that they go on to achieve those dreams, but they were so determined. And did it kind of give you, I don't know, it just gave me a lot of faith in humanity. But just to see these, I mean, because one of the things when you're watching something, you've seen other people doing good, you hope it resonates and the other
Mhm.
people that watch it will do good. Was that
Yeah.
kind of part of your intention, not only celebrating their story, but also to sort of say, hey, like, we've all got our bit to do in this world, and here's a great example.
Yeah. That was a big part of it. Was like I said, like during this time, they're in this community in these circumstances that are so much more dire and complicated than us of the Western world, right? Like when you think, like, I'm talking to my friends in the US and they're complaining because they can't go to a club or a bar, right? And and then you have these kids on the other side who are in this situation that is just 100 times worse, and still found it in themselves to do good and do better. And that was kind of like the piece of it, was showing that, like, if these guys can do this, we can all do this, right? Just do your part. And another piece of it is specifically in Cape Town, in South Africa, but especially in Cape Town, it's the hardest hit area from the apartheid. And it the division is very much still there. So when you hear about this Black kid who wants to build a restaurant on Table Mountain, it's like, for his peers, even older than him, that's unfathomable because of the situations and in the division that's there, right? And you have this kid who's been kind of cultivated into believing he has self-worth, and a lot of his community and peers don't have that because of the hundreds of years of what's happened there, right? And so it was, to me, it was powerful to see, like, this is truly the apartheid just ended in the 90s, right? It's not like your parents, your grandparents, this is like somebody who's 20, 27, 20, like whatever it is, like lived through it. So to see that this is kind of the first generation of past that is actually dreaming is like super powerful, because it's so fresh in that country. This would be the equivalent of talking, like doing a doc about somebody in, the late 70s or early 80s, who is dreaming to be a president, or dreaming to, open up a restaurant in, New York City or whatever, because it's that fresh from the civil rights era there.
I mean, again, it's very, everything is still very, very fresh. And the one thing that I'm really glad upon is that, you set a great light on this beautiful part of the world, with beautiful people, and was it something that you kind of wanted to resonate? Because we don't see enough, as on this side of the planet, of the great filmmakers, documentaries, and stories from Africa as we should. Was that something you kind of wanted to resonate with, not just the Western, but particularly an American audience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, when you see stories coming from the continent of Africa, most of the time it's from a lens that is not that community.
Yeah.
And it's and most of the time it's tone deaf.
Yep.
And I thought it was really important to kind of show what actual people are going through and living, in the continent, as opposed to the very stereotypical, villages and face paint and ceremonies, which does happen, but that's not life in Africa for everybody, right? And the thing that's important to me is Africa is the youngest continent in the globe, like age-wise, across the board, the youngest continent. So when you look at 15 to 20 years from now, Africa is the continent for innovation and growth, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So showing that this young population in this country, these are going to be your leaders in 15, 20 years. Like when Owusu, is 35, 40 years old. Like, so it was important for me to show people outside of the continent, and even people in the continent, even right there in that community, there's people that don't have the mindset that they have and don't see the world the way that they see the world. So I thought that was super important to
It's
show.
amazing. It's made up of over 50 countries of just it's an incredible, like, a continent, because there's obviously not just within Africa, there's a lot of different nations that have got a lot of incredible culture and experiences, and I'm so glad that you shone a light on these young men. And it goes for me to say, as a documentary filmmaker, you always find about things upon your journey you may stumble across. What was kind of some of the biggest challenges that you kind of face as a director making this project, and following the lives of these great young men?
Yeah, so obviously, I think any director will tell you, unless you're like Chris Nolan, a challenge is money, right? So, some directors just get unlimited amounts, but that was one thing. I was there, like I said, on accident during lockdown. There was no studio involved. There was no budget. It was like, I have my cameras, my equipment, and I didn't even have a crew that I normally work with. So these were people that I had met while I was there on lockdown. You know, a photographer, a videographer, a brand new producer, Ola Maswana, the producer of this film. This was her first film she produced, and yeah, and she went to film school, came out, worked at a production house, and was kind of very admin like at the production house, but wanted to move into producing. And I was like, hey, here's your chance. Let's get some experience under your belt. So there was the crew, the budget, the in the timeline, because I didn't have really a lot of funds to pull this off. I had to. We shot this whole thing. What was it? Three days, 3 different days.
3 days. Okay.
Yeah, and that was also another challenge in post. Was I wanted you to watch the film and get the sense that it was like a month's worth of journey.
Yeah, it felt like it.
Yeah.
And also, that's rare for a documentary that
Yeah.
that time. Wow. Okay, genius. That's amazing.
so, so yeah, so it was one of those things where I knew, like, because I wanted to pay the people for their time, and the crew and the people who are around me helping me make it. So I knew, like, if it's coming out of my pocket, I can't have these people here for a month,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
doing this thing. So I was like, okay, great, let's figure out. I wrote the story in a way that we would be able to give you the full journey without having to actually stick around for that full journey. So
Wow.
yeah, so I think that was the biggest challenge, was writing it in a way that would give you the full scope of things, and then it coming together in post. Post production is a thing in a documentary, because you have, even in 3 days, I still had enough footage to make this hour long like thing, and it was like, how do I tell the most concise story and cut out what I need to cut out, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Amazing. Wow, 3 days. There you go. Sounds like a challenge in itself, but no, amazing. What has been the reaction been like? I'm even curious with like the people you had involved, in the production that will obviously work at this nonprofit. Like, what's the reaction been with them? What's the reaction been with your wider audience?
Yeah, so obviously, like, those guys seeing themselves on camera was a highlight. Like, when I saw them watch it for the first time, and then they're hitting each other on the shoulder and pointing at the screen,
Love
and they've become somewhat of local celebrities in their community, because we were following them around, co-camera crew, following these three guys around. And Tony, the owner, like, he's using there's a shorter kind of 4 minute kind of promotional piece that he's using to fundraise for those guys in the Sun Diner, which is live on YouTube. I actually need to share that link with you so we can get that in rotation.
it up on the bottom right here for us. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're trying to raise funds to get the Sun Diner up and running, and get those guys Gigi's restaurant, Oetu's restaurant, and Gigi's artwork and all those things going on. But yeah, it's been received really well, and I'm super happy for those guys. And a lot of people say congrats to me, but I was just holding a camera and those guys were doing all the work. So it's like,
Well, you need to keep us up to date of their careers too. Like, I'm going to that restaurant on that mountain. I'm gonna go find it. Okay. It was just so great to see just their passion, their dreams, and sharing their dreams. And sometimes when you share your dreams out to the world, or on camera, it's a step closer to getting there. And listen, Déwun, I just looking through your journey, and I've looked, you've done some fantastic music as well, and anyone that's seen any of your projects or films, you have just such a wonderful imagination and vision. And I'm just curious, for you as a filmmaker, what subjects or what things drive you? Like, what is your drive, your heart, your passion into projects? What's the thing for you?
yeah, so for me, it's always a human story. That's like what drives me every time. like everything has a story, man. Like the coffee cup you drink out of in the morning, right? Like it came from somewhere and then somebody touched it who has a story and somebody designed it who has a story. And like everything just has this story. So like even when I'm not doing doc, it's like if I do branded content or I do a music video or I do a commercial, I'm like literally like, how can we tell a story here? Like I never want to be strictly style. That's like never like there has to be substance there.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what drives me is like, do you feel like, you know, a story was told here? Do you have a connection to it?
Well, I mean, no, and I love that. And one thing I noticed at the film festival was, as I mentioned in our green room, was that everyone's just like, "Wow, Day One is like." So hang on, he's gone in America. He made a film in South Africa. He's in Brazil. Like he's living the dream. Like so, is the curious question is, and I know you've got much more things, projects to do, but what is next for you? What's happening for you right now during these particular times as well?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I also write television and unscripted shows and etc. So I am working with artist in South Africa named Patty Monroe to produce a television show called Keeping It 100. It's going to be launched on Telkom One and their partnership with SABC in South Africa. We'll be starting production for that beginning of April. So I'll be going back to South Africa for that, and then on the film side, I am right now in the pitch process for a TV doc series called A Grain of Gold. And it is about the history, the evolution, the migration, the everything to do with the West African dish jollof rice and how it's become this pop culture icon across the world. And there's a lot of human stories that kind of tie into that dish and where you know where it's going. So um, that's the next thing.
I'm just excited. Just keep making more of everything that you can do. Right? But no, listen, thanks so much. I'm so honored and glad we got to see this amazing nonprofit, these amazing young people, and let them lead the line for humanity and how we should be caring about each other moving forward. And so big thank you to them, and thank
Yeah.
you for bringing this film to us, Day One.
No, thank you for having me. And I can't wait to see, even from a distribution standpoint, like what happens with this film and how many more people that we can get to witness these young guys' story. We're pretty early in the film festival run for this short, so I'm definitely looking forward to what's next for it.
Definitely. Here we go.